I was born and raised a Jehovah's Witness, but 2 years ago I was disfellowshipped. And I'm really sweaty and I just got home from work and I realized that I had finished the video but forgot to record this intro, so I'm doing that now. When you're disfellowshipped, you have to sit down with the elders in a really creepy meeting called a Judicial Committee. It is essentially a closed-door trial. Because it was pandemic times, the meeting happened over Zoom, which made it really easy for me to record and then upload to YouTube. That happened 2 years ago. And then 1 year ago, I did a stream reacting to my judicial committee for more or less the first time since it happened. And I was thinking like, oh, that was a good stream. I should upload that to the channel. And I realized it's been a year since I did the stream where I reacted to a thing from a year ago, which is to say the compounding effect of recording yourself over 3+ years on the internet is really weird. So that's what this video is today. It is that stream from a year ago, which I have edited and made fun and watchable. The weird thing that I noticed when watching back is that so much of my life and my opinions had changed even in the course of a year. You'll see that at times I appear to be pretty confident that I have reached the end of some kind of journey, and now I feel pretty confident that I am only at the beginning of whatever this journey is or has been or will be. For example, my wife, she is now Pimo and joins me on the channel sometimes, but in the stream from a year ago, she wasn't coming on the streams, and at one point I talked to her off screen and we referred to her in code. This video is really fun, but it is also a really weird reflection of the fact that XJW journeys are a journey, and they go the rest of your whole gosh dang life, apparently. Like, wherever you are now in your faith transition journey watching this, you're going to think differently about the place you are now a year from now. Did that make sense? Like I said, I just got home from work. Also, Bo is in the video, and that has not changed. He's still a huge asshole. I don't know what it was exactly, but I just started thinking a lot today about my journey. But I got an alert recently that my Reddit birthday for my alt-worldly account on Reddit was 3 years old. I made that account the night that I had started doing research on the XJW subreddit and then YouTube, and I was up all night just
spiraling and going insane.
That was kind of crazy. 3 years, it took me there was another year or two of being Pimo or whatever, and now I've been disfellowshipped for over a year. I was looking back, I posted my judicial committee in, I think, May of 2021. So by then, it had already been a couple months since I had already done that. And I just, I really haven't gone back to it, but maybe once for kicks and gigs. I felt like I could do it because I had listened to enough of them where I know, okay, I know what I'm getting into. And obviously mine was on Zoom because it was height of the pandemic, and so I knew that it would be pretty easy to screen record. I just used OBS. What I don't know if people know is that I was drinking the entire time. I had a glass that was opaque, you couldn't see through it, but I was drinking bourbon or something the whole time I was talking. So I was a little buzzed going into the judicial committee. I don't know if any of that comes through when you listen to it. I wasn't sloshed or anything. Cam says, looking back, I wish I had fought more. I basically refused to explain my reasons because I felt like I didn't owe them an explanation. Now I wish I had spoken up more. So that's interesting. One thing that I see, and the correct answer is that everybody's journey should be their journey, and everybody, to the extent that it's possible within these incredibly restrictive confines, should get to do what they want to do. And some people feel like, I don't know the elder an explanation, so I'm just going to fuck off and fade or not return their texts or literally tell them to fuck off, send in a letter. And some people are like, don't even do that. These men have no power over you. Why would you even go to the judicial committee? I got that comment a lot. And I found that really insulting, actually, at the time. I was like, fuck you. This is my journey. I want to do this, first of all, most importantly, for the Lord above. Content. I wanted to record it because I was like, this would make a good video. I mean, I like listening to these things. I think this could be a valuable resource. The main reason why I wanted to do it is because the thing I had realized listening to them, listening to other recordings, there is no point in going because they are completely ill-equipped to handle it. But it's good to hear it. It's good to hear how ill-equipped they are to deal with earnest criticisms. I think that can be really powerful. That certainly had an impact on me. And I've thought that, like, yes, even though it is literally futile, I know that going in. I'm not going in to change their mind. I'm going in to demonstrate the futility of the process in a recording so that other people know what it's like. And then from there can kind of decide, like, is it really worth me going through this? I kind of wanted it to be a best case scenario. I mean, it's not really in my nature to be super like combative and, and confrontational anyway about stuff like this. So I mean, if it's Star Wars opinions, you know, go to fucking war. It's not called Star Hangout. It's called Star Wars, and I'll fight. But, you know, when it comes to stuff like this, you know, I know all these guys. I wasn't going to be all mean to them or anything. I wanted to like do like, okay, best case scenario, you're still kind of screwed, and demonstrate that. That's what I wanted to do. Whatever you decided to do was right. But it's interesting to hear Cam's perspective here. She says, I think I was scared that I would burst into tears under scrutiny, so I needed it to end ASAP. I wanted it to be done. Just break it and let myself be free in the opportunity to heal. And see, like, that's super valid. That's super valid. It is valid. And that is something that I worried that I would like kind of go off, that I would get upset or angry, come off as a bit of a dick, or at the very least kind of come off as like the stereotypical bitter apostate. While I wasn't in a judicial, I do kick myself for not recording my 3 meetings with them. Good to have proof of what actually happened, since people made stuff up afterwards. Audio would have shut down. Yeah, that is another thing that I was kind of curious about. And I'm still really curious about. I don't know. I don't know if they'll stop doing them. I mean, it's pretty hard to. I think they definitely don't want to do them over Zoom. I saw a post on the XJW Reddit recently, actually, and it was somebody like, I'm going to try to record my judicial committee, which I do. And somebody suggested like Zoom, and they were like, yeah, they're pretty adamant that we can't do it on Zoom. And I'll bet that they're like, this is opening ourselves up to some really easy screen sharing. XJW Caleb says, Jake, did you have any confirmation of how they actually find your vid? No, I don't think I'm going to can find anything out unless an elder that like in the area wakes up and tells me. I don't know. I always got conflicting stories about how it was found. And I think the ones that I said in the beginning, like in my preamble to the recording, that's still all I know, that it was either a family member, the Bible study, or it was just a family member. I don't want to dox anybody, so I'm going to try not to refer to these guys by name. So I'm just going to refer to the man who's speaking currently as Kermit.
Kind of has a low Kermit voice.
Like Jordan Peterson, but a baritone. So this is Kermit, Brother Kermit's talking right now.
But we really appreciate you making the time and joining us here. To begin, let's ask to open our meeting with prayer.
Amen.
Amen. Oh yeah, I skipped.
Thank
We skipped the prayer.
So yeah, Jake, as we mentioned over the phone when contacted you, that this is a judicial hearing, and the reason for it was is apostasy.
Okay.
Feel that by means of the YouTube posts that you're deliberately spreading false teachings and even causing divisions, undermining confidence of the brothers in Jehovah.
Whoa, so much. This is actually interesting because I definitely, even when putting this video together, I skipped past the shit that they were saying as much as I could. Right off the bat, the accusation is intentionally spreading false teachings. Is that the wording that was used? Intentionally spreading false teachings, undermining trust in the brotherhood. What I like about this wording is that it kind of shows the lack of individuality and like autonomy you have as a witness. A false teaching by whose metric, right?
Even causing division, deliberately spreading false teachings.
Deliberately spreading false teachings, yeah.
And even causing divisions.
Causing divisions. My videos like aren't teaching people. I don't spread teachings in the sense that Watchtower likes to use it, right? Like, I guess I'm teaching people to some extent about stuff they might not know. Like if I reference the Australian Royal Commission and a witness is watching it and they haven't heard of it before, they might see that as a false teaching, like Watchtower, but I'm not spreading a false teaching. I am just saying that the thing exists, but it is not a teaching. The way witnesses uses the phrase teaching is like the doctrine. They basically use teaching in place of doctrine. Like the current teaching is the universal sovereignty issue. Like that's the core teaching of Jehovah's Witnesses. They have a lot of weird words. He does sound like Nathan Fielder. Okay, this is Brother Fielder now. That's way better. And yeah, causing divisions. That's kind of interesting because it seems to me, I put something on YouTube and I suppose some people don't like that I don't suppose. I know that some people were offended by that existing, but that seems to only have divided them to me, like divided against me. But I don't see sects forming in the way that Watchtower does this. Like, you know, whenever they refer back to their teaching for their scriptural basis for disfellowshipping and apostasy, they go back to the 1st century and they have to go to Paul's words about false brothers spreading false teachings and stirring up divisions in the congregation.
Reminding confidence of the brothers in Jehovah's arrangement.
Arrangement's another fun, specific word. That word does not mean what Watchtower says it means to anybody else. An arrangement is like a deal. Like we got a deal, right? We have an arrangement. We have an understanding. But for witnesses, an arrangement is like a system of things. Yeah. So I question their authority and ability to gatekeep truth.
So, and just as a reminder, for privacy reasons, there should be no audio or video recording of the hearing. But I wanted to start with just a couple scriptures as we get in.
Okay, I guess we should talk about this where I slid in the upside down smiley face. Yeah, he says no recording. So obviously, like, I checked my state's laws on recordings, and it's, I guess I forget the wording, but it's like one party consent state. So as long as one person knows that it's being recorded. So technically, it doesn't matter that they don't know that it's being recorded. So they can say that. They can say, we ask that there be no recordings. And I can say nothing and then just do it anyway. And is this sneaky, this sort of sneaky, devious apostasy that Watchtower likes to point out? I guess. Ooh, did they say the hearing? That's interesting wording.
Of the hearing.
Of the hearing, yes.
But
I object.
I wanted to start with just a couple scriptures as we get into our discussion here.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. Well, that's my thing. You know, I know how these things go. When somebody's announced as disfellowship, like, you don't know if it's like murder or they watched too much porn or they cheated on their wife. And, you know, frankly, as a married man, I was really worried that would be the perception. I don't know if I've ever really talked about that with my wife, but I was really worried that would be the perception. So I wanted there to be proof that I did not have sexual relations with any other woman. I didn't ask Hillary to give me a Monica. I just thought it was only fair that I have this for my personal use. And it just so happens that my personal computer automatically uploads to YouTube. I actually don't necessarily want to hear my intro. It bums me out too much. I think I started out by saying, like, you guys are great. I'm not mad at you. It's not you, it's me. Oh, yeah, okay. They ask why I haven't taken the videos down.
We talked a little bit about, you know, if you had given thought to taking down the YouTube post, and you mentioned that you did, but you didn't feel that really that you would need to. Some time has passed. How do you feel about, I noticed the YouTube posts are still up. How do you feel about it now?
I want to see this comment here. When my dad was removed as an elder, when I was privately reproved at 16, my mom was more worried people would think he cheated on me than you getting reproved. Yeah, I know. Isn't that fucked up? It's just like the lack of an explanation is the point. If they announced what somebody did, then people could check and see if it was true. But leaving people to speculate kind of helps their case. Like, this is going to be an example that annoys people, but I don't care. It's my video. A lot of Republicans will be like, oh, of course we hate racism. We don't like racism at all. But then they pass policies that very specifically are racist and marginalize people of color and gerrymander them out of their vote mattering and all that stuff. So they can say one thing, but by all of their actions, they are clearly causing another thing to happen. And so what Watchtower gets to do is they get to say, like, well, obviously as Christians, we don't gossip about one another, while also fostering an environment where people are constantly policing each other, where you have to check and see if somebody's good association or not. The gossip mill, and that is absolutely critical. Yeah, this is the thing that my dad would throw at me too. Told him, that I had listened to recordings of judicial committees. He's like,
You don't know what happened in those rooms. You've never been in a committee, but I have. You just don't know what happens back there.
Bo, dude. He's mad because he no longer has my Coldplay poster to tear down because he did it already. Yeah, elders have to buy into these lies too. I would actually be interested. I don't know if Matt are still watching, but I'd be interested to hear, when you would hear this kind of wording, we don't have all the facts that the elders have. Did you agree with those sentiments? Did that ring true to you? Hey, I know that it seems one way, but when they were under oath, it all came out. Turned out they were a secret murderer the whole time. I would have agreed with it at the time since I did know of occasions where the rumor was different than what actually happened. Okay, I can see that happening where the rumor is different. But, that also comes from a lack of transparency too. We don't know what actually happened because they don't tell us. Oh, you know what? I will talk about this. So this is, oh my God, what are you doing? So the elders asked me, have you considered taking the videos down? And they asked me that in all the previous meetings I had. And so I said here, I would do it if it was a deal breaker for my wife. And that was something that we talked about, obviously. And the thing that I had said at the time, and my entire reason for starting the channel was so that I could also have a voice. But the way I presented it was, you get to preach. You get to go door to door and witness. And it does not seem fair to me that I should be silent and I should not get to have any kind of outlet, even an optional one that people can take or leave, but the witnesses in my family do. And that's just kind of where we landed, but I was always open to taking the channel down, and I did mean it, even though I would have been mad. I would have been sad and I would have been resentful over it, but that they asked about that, and that's a bit of background on that. Not ashamed of what I said. And in the same way that, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I was raised to express, not just feel your faith, not just have convictions internally, but you express those things. 37 minutes is referred to as I get heated. That might be more interesting. Let's see if this gets... When you feel you have... See if this shitty video gets any better. Who made this shit? You want to tell other people. And that's... something that's talked about all the time when it comes to the ministry, why we need to be zealous in the ministry, because we have this life-saving message, and if we're holding on to that and not telling other people, then what does that mean? And I'm not saying that I have a life-saving message, or even I specifically as me has a message, but the way I was raised was, if you have something important to say that would benefit people, you don't just hold that in and shut up about it. You talk about it with people. And, YouTube makes sense just because, first of all, I'm of a different generation. That's how people talk. We talk to each other on the internet. People record videos, they post them. That's just how it is. And even my generation wasn't totally like that, but now it's crazy. Just Gen Z or whatever it is after me. Fuck, I sound like such an old fuddy-duddy. I think the point I'm trying to make here is that the idea of going online and talking about your opinions on shit is not scandalous. Watchtower is kind of trying to make it seem like a big deal, but it really isn't. It's just not a big deal for anybody to post their opinions on shit, especially their religion. There's evangelical TikTok, there's Mormon LDS lifestyle YouTube channels. I don't know why that doesn't exist for witnesses. That's kind of what my hope is in talking to witnesses, is not even really to change their mind or to necessarily change the minds of people listening, but to start to change the culture so that witnesses feel more emboldened to go on YouTube about their own beliefs. Because if they do that, and they start to feel comfortable doing that on YouTube, then that can open them up to criticism. That can open them up to rebuttals, people making rebuttals to their videos specifically, like what Evans did to John Maple, right? When John Maple was a JW trying to make apologia as a witness. Yeah, I think I'm interested in trying to see if we can like change that culture a little bit. And I was surprised that I got any responses at all from witnesses to begin with. So that's the point that I was trying to make in the video. It's like, you know, you guys are acting like it's some big deal that I have a YouTube channel. It kind of isn't. It really kind of is not a big deal. This is a good question, and I'll have to ask. I never heard anything from anybody, but from what I would hear through the grapevine, it did seem like people noticed that a lot of people would watch some of the videos. Like somebody said something to Jarbin the Butler along the lines of, you know, none of us could have known that the channel would be, you know, as successful, that Jake would be as successful as he was. And I don't have a lot of, I guess the JW definition of success is very different from my own. But I think that they do peek in. I think that they do notice. So to me, like, they definitely know about it. And I thought for sure that they would reach out to me and tell me to take it down, but they didn't. And I kind of wonder if they didn't, because they realized in part that that would just make for an even better video where I talk about the fact that the elders or Watchtower told me to take down secret recording. I never heard of anybody knowing about that. The only thing that I think has reached the wider public is that I talked about being bi, and now people think I left because I'm gay. So they're half right. I wasn't too concerned about stumbling active and uncritical brothers and sisters in the congregation, because you would have to actively look for it in order to find it. And even if you found it, then you'd have to click on it, and then you'd have to watch it and consume and see what was being said. And it seemed like too many steps for just, you know, someone like my mom to just stumble across it. And oh my God, now I've been stumbled and my faith has been undermined. So I haven't taken it down because I'm not aiming these videos at people that are just wholehearted believers. They don't have any questions. They don't have any issues. You know, for them, that's great. They don't have any desire to, they don't have any concerns, and that's fine. Okay, I like this point. I give myself a G for good on this one. I think this is a valid point, because this was legitimately something that I thought about. Like, I had really worked up in my head, like, okay, I'm going to post this face reveal video. And then I was like, actually, why would any witness ever see this? Because like, I started to think like, okay, so I have like 1,500 subscribers. Witnesses, if they're going to go on YouTube to do anything, are definitely not going to be looking up XJW stuff. So why would my video ever show up in their feed? So then I posted it, and I kind of thought, like, why would any witness ever even see this? I might have really worked this up in my head and nobody finds it. And then that's kind of disappointing. And it did get found like the next day. But anyway, it's not just the idea of spreading teachings concerns them, but I'm not really spreading anything, am I? Like, I've posted something on YouTube, and then people can choose to watch it or not. And the only way that a witness is going to find it is if they look for it. Or, as is what happened for most witnesses, another witness sends them the video and says,
Jake made a video about why he doesn't want to be a witness anymore.
That is what actually happened. And that video to this day, like my face reveal video, doesn't have very many views. What's funny is I think a lot of the people who did watch it were witnesses, like disproportionately. Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Like, they have that picture in that recent Watchtower. The family's like, oh no, there's a critical report about witnesses. Turn off the TV. Like, even if they saw something, oh, sorry, I missed the context of Falling Tower's comment. You're right. I did cart witnessing. I did a cart witnessing. I did a metropolitan preaching work on accident. My goal was to try to appeal to people like myself who, when I started having questions and doubts in the organization, I felt like I was going crazy and I wanted to die. I wanted to kill myself because I couldn't imagine. It's interesting how they respond to this. I think I remember them kind of brushing this off. This is everything, and it's not just everything to me. It's not just everything I've dedicated my life to, but I'm married. I'm supposed to be a spiritual head. This is the legacy of my family going back generations. if this isn't true, then how could I possibly continue living, and I would talk to brothers, and it wouldn't help. But what did eventually help was listening to experiences of people who have been through something similar and have come through feeling restored in their faith, or they've come to a new understanding of things, or an adjusted understanding. And so I wanted to help people who... A little bit of foreshadowing. This is kind of an interesting thing that the witness I talked to debated, if you will. This is something that they have a really hard time understanding, you'll see, is they're like, no, but we do have an answer to that. That thing you had a doubt about, we do have an answer. And what they couldn't get was like, yeah, I know. I know what the answer is. I don't think it's a good answer. It doesn't work for me. It's not convincing. And I think that was the real sense of disconnect that I felt. Okay, I'm doing my research. I found the answer that Watchtower has, and it seems manipulative and hollow and thin. Yeah, see, this makes me so fucking sad. And it's just like, they're just not trained in anything. They're given a book of rules, and if you've ever read the Shepherd's book, it's just a very bland manual of bullet points of like what to do if this happens, what to do if this happens, but they're pretty much nothing about... They're not given the kind of training that some clergy people are, and I have no love for the clergy of any kind, but at least some of them do get training to like how to know that you need to refer to someone, to a professional, or like what if someone's suicidal, what if they need more help than you can offer. And elders they don't have any of that. So that was my goal, and that's why I haven't taken him down, is because I've gotten a lot of nice messages that people have found him helpful.
And
that's another thing that I try to remind myself of with my comparing myself to others thing, is it's like, you know what? I get messages from people that say that this stuff helps them. Why do I need it to be anything more than that? Like, it doesn't need to be anything more than that. Like, if you help people, that's the only thing that's important. And sometimes I lose track of that.
Fact that some active witnesses have become aware of it, that doesn't affect your decision.
Have become aware of it. No, I mean, active witnesses are already aware that stuff like this exists. I mean, I was aware that apostate material existed, and the existence of that didn't disturb me. I mean, maybe I guess I didn't love it. True. I mean, this is one of the things that, to get real for a second, been fake the whole time. Now, finally, let's get real. I had a really hard time with like suicidal thoughts and stuff when I was, when I'd woken up, knew that I was in a cult and knew the ramifications of leaving and didn't know what to do. Is I started to get the sense that it would actually be better for my family if I did kill myself, because then at least they would have the memory of me that they prefer, and whatever happens to me later, they wouldn't have to think of me as some evil apostate. They could at least have this comfort in their own minds that I would be resurrected, blah, blah, blah. And I would tell my parents, when I told my parents that, it was just like, they just weren't bothered by it. They just didn't know what to say. I was like, would you rather that I be dead? Because that's kind of the option that I had. It's like, leave the organization or I kill myself, because that's the path that I was on. And the thing that's really fucking hard for me is the blood transfusion part of everything. Like, I needed a blood transfusion to live. And while that was happening, I know my parents were like texting my wife, like, oh, don't be stumbled by his medical choices. We can't control what he does or whatever. And I'm like, would they have preferred that I didn't get a blood transfusion and died? Like, would they prefer that I die? So like, I still get that. No, I don't get that feeling of wanting to die anymore. Thankfully, I'm past that. But what I do get is like, I get this urge to message my parents and be like, would you have preferred that I died? Do you want me to be dead? Do you care that I'm alive right now? And that's the thing that I struggle with, is there's so much I want to say to them. There's so much I want to throw in their face. There's so much I want to make them feel bad about, because I feel like they deserve it. Like, I know it's kind of dark, but I'm like, that's one of the things that, like, I really struggle with, is I'm like, I know that I'm supposed to want them to be happy, because you're supposed to want that for people, but I don't want them to be happy. I don't want them to be content and happy and satisfied. I want them to be miserable. I don't want them to be like comfortable with their decisions. I don't want them to feel good or validated in their choice. I want them to always wonder if they've done something wrong. I want them to, miss me. I don't want them to move on from me. And that's kind of dark. And it's like, do I really think that, or am I just kind of lashing out? I don't know. Like, those are the kind of things that might be good to bounce off the therapist. Working on it. We're working on figuring that out. Hey, it's Future, disheveled, just got home from work, Jake again. I also just remembered that I wanted to insert this. All of this stuff that I talk about in this part, things that I wonder about my parents, that I wish I could say to my parents, especially like my mom and dad, wondering if they care if I died. I actually did end up saying that to my mom. I said basically all of that exact thing that you just heard in a text, and I haven't really heard from her after that. She continues to send me student loan notifications as student loans are about to resume. She forwards those from her email because technically the loans were taken out in her name, which is also a good reminder to that Patreon exists. I gotta say, I had really mixed feelings about sending that message, especially because we haven't been able to talk or resolve things since. But if you're wondering if you should say stuff like that to your parents, it has been a huge weight off my shoulders, because at least now I know that they know how I feel and how hurt I am over their decisions. It may not end up swaying the way they think. It might just end up making them think that, wow, Jake's really talking some Satan talk. How dare he talk to his mother that way, suggesting that she would let him die without a blood transfusion, or whatever I said. But I do feel good about knowing that they know how I feel. Oh boy. Okay, you get the point. If you don't like the negative headline at the top of the newspaper, you might not like it, but that doesn't mean that it's not actually news that's happening. But you don't have to read it if you don't want to feel bummed out. I mean, that's... If somebody actually felt like their faith was undermined because of watching a YouTube video, I feel like that says more about their faith and what the organization is teaching than about the person making the YouTube video. Yeah, damn. Well done, me. Pass, Jake. Pretty good job. The question that they pose is like, okay, yeah, but now witnesses know that you've put this out there. And the very fact that you have done this upsets them, has stumbled them. I actually don't even know that they said that. I think they just said, like, the fact that people have become aware of it doesn't bother you. No, like, you don't have a right to ignorance, I feel like, right? Like, you don't have a right to, like, pretend that nobody is criticizing you. Like, you don't have to listen to criticism, because a lot of people get bad faith criticism. You don't have to listen to every asshole demanding a debate in your Twitter feed or whatever. But, I mean, if that criticism exists somewhere and it's healthy and it's optional, then who gives a shit? Like, witnesses are told increasingly more often that there are all these apostates saying all these things. So apparently they're aware of it. And I don't know. That was kind of a weird thing that they brought up. But it goes back to something that I'm kind of mulling over, doing a video essay on in my mind, which is the outward appearance. I want to make a whole video on witnesses and the concept of the outward appearance, because that one of the things that they say a lot, and that goes back to one of the things we've been talking about of like doublespeak, is like Jehovah does not judge by the outward appearance. And the only facet that they mean that in is like, if you were in the ministry and you see like a dude with a beard and a biker gang shirt, don't discount him, because he could convert. But as soon as they start studying, all of their internal policies are completely based around outward appearance. Like, the punishment doled out in a lot of cases is dependent on who knows about it, how many people know about it. There was recently, Mark O'Donnell released this list of like requirements for ranking speakers or choosing speakers for assemblies and conventions. And one of the requirements was like, have they done something in the past that is well known in the community and that might upset some? It's like, it's all outward appearance. Don't have a beard because we don't like those. Don't wear a skirt that's too short because a man might get a boner. It's completely about perception. And so it's interesting that like all of their arguments so far is like, okay, you're spreading false teachings. And I'm like, well, I'm not really teaching anything. I'm like, okay, well, you're undermining trust in the brotherhood. I guess only if people watch it and they listen to what I have to say and they agree with it. Like, they don't have to believe me. And then it kind of comes down to the fact that like, well, the mere fact that this exists is upsetting. It's like, okay, so that's it. That's kind of the core of the issue. Criticism now exists. That is unacceptable. Moving on.
But the goal is not to undermine anybody's faith. The goal is just to present information and
do I cut
mostly
in here
now just talk about my own experiences in a
I know I
in a
cut in
sense
at a
of,
couple points.
solidarity with people who have gone through similar experiences.
I wonder if that's true. Okay, let's think about this. Is my goal to undermine people's faith? Generally speaking, no. I mean, like, for the most part, the videos that I make are not actually aimed towards witnesses. Like, I think if I was worried about that, I wouldn't make shit like that YouTube poop video of Stephen Lett talking about pornography. Like, I wouldn't do as many internety memey shits if I was worried about that. But like, I did recently make a video that was like a challenge for Jehovah's Witnesses, and I want to make more of those. So I guess I do. Now I kind of do want to, if not undermine their faith, and challenge it. But the funny thing, of course, is like, it's not that I want people to become atheists. It's that I just want them to question whether or not their complete allegiance to a religious organization is healthy. Like, how far are you willing to go for this group? What would it take for you to leave? And actually, we've been going for fucking an hour and 20 minutes. How are we feeling, chat? Let me know, because I'm kind of interested in skipping ahead.
Your intention is not to focus on.
Let's get to I Get Heated. Let's see what that's all
part of. When I look at 1 Corinthians 1:10, it just doesn't seem to have a unifying effect. And so I don't know if you would agree with that.
My videos don't seem to have a unifying effect. I mean, fair, true. I guess this is not effusively praising the organization. Therefore, it is not unifying people to cling to what they have always thought to be true. And that can only mean trouble.
Not, I guess, what's your thoughts?
Well, I would not agree with that. Because another verse that we love to cite is that Jesus did not come to unite, but to divide. He came with the sword, and he came to separate. He goes on to list,
I'm uniting 100 people right now.
He lists all these things because he knew that his message would be divisive. So on one hand, unity, of course, important, but on the other hand, truth is divisive. And these kinds of dichotomies,
this is actually, I think this is a good point. I feel like we talked about this in a stream recently, the kind of like different cadences that come up, especially when brothers give talks, like the way that Stephen Lett or Joel Dellinger, I think it was the guy that I was talking about on stream was Joel Dellinger, who gives morning worship talks and talks on convention stuff. He doesn't talk like that, kind of like, hey, what's going on, Jehovah? Like, he doesn't talk like that in real life, obviously. But he adopts a certain cadence when he talks, because that's how you're trained. Like, this is the convention voice. This is how we talk when we give talks. And I think there's this weird solemnity to elders meetings where they're like, this is a solemn occasion. And it's almost like you talk like lawyers. And I gotta find the actual page in the Shepherd book. I think it's in the Shepherd book, but there's a section, one of the older versions that talked about how to prepare your heart for judgment. Prepare your heart to be a judge. And so they really kind of see themselves as judges who have inherited this like spiritual responsibility that is a part of a lineage that goes back to the first century congregations. It's very self-serious and it's very wordy, not like me at all. I don't say too many words.
I think are all over Jesus' message. But again, I feel that the organization likes to cherry pick scriptures.
That would be good.
And not look at the context. 1 Corinthians 1:10, talking about speaking in agreement. But what are they talking about? Well, in verse 12, he says, what I mean is this, that each one of you says, I belong to Paul, but I to Apollos, but I to Cephas, but I to Christ. Is the Christ divided? The issue, this was not just a conversation, there's not just a letter about agreeing about everything at all costs. This was not about unity to the detriment of truth. This was about being united and not following men, but in following Jesus. That's what he said. He said that some people belonged to Christ, but some people were more in it for following men. And what I came to feel, particularly when the broadcast started and the governing body started to be more in the limelight, was that there was an increased emphasis on the organization, on the religion itself, and on obeying men, who of course claimed to be appointed by Jesus.
Right.
But it's a conveniently invisible process that we're not allowed to see. And if you look at the last, morning worship talk that Brother Lett gave, we're not even allowed to ask questions about how we know that people are anointed. If you ask questions, that's none of your business. It's
interesting how I am way more articulate in this kind of impromptu conversation that I am in this thing, reflecting on it with the ability to I guess I basically agree with everything I said. And yeah, I really like this. This fellowshipping is literally divisive. It is casting out somebody, casting the wicked out from among yourselves, united in Christ. Gotta love it. What they're saying, I want to leave Watchtower without a judicial committee because I just don't care for Watchtower anymore. I don't want to go through committee unnecessarily, wasting my time. Any suggestions? Is there no way to exit stage left quietly? It's designed so that you can't leave with dignity. It's designed so that at some point it's probably going to be a little messy. But at the same time, I do think that you can fade, relatively speaking. It's just kind of hard to do. And I mean, obviously I have my issues with Lloyd Evans, but like that series that he did, Fade Interrupted, is really good because there's a series of interviews about how people try to fade but can't because the elders kind of track you down. Okay, Jules has a good thing. If you can, do what I did, move, and just don't start going to a new congregation. I think that's kind of the play. I know moving can be tough, and it's not feasible for everybody. The least confrontational thing to do would just be to write a letter, simply saying, I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness. I don't want to get calls from the elders. I don't want a shepherding visit. I don't want text, phone calls, blah, blah, blah. I think if you put it that way, obviously they're going to announce that you're disfellowshipped or that you're no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but that will be a clean break and that will sever the tie without having to go through a judicial process. Okay, Maria's got advice too. I just left. And when they called, I told them, consider me inactive. I don't want counsel or advice. Don't call me. It worked more or less because they did call, but I just didn't answer. Yeah, well, there you go. Jenny says, I'm still waiting to be contacted for my public apostasy and private living in sin. Okay. I didn't know that you hadn't been formally reproved in any way or disfellowshipped or whatever. Fade to X Adam, good to see you, by the way. I played the mental health card. I am left alone. Disfellowship. I mean, that really is a solid play. The thing that I experienced doing that was that then they wanted to do a lot of shepherding calls. But I have to say, if you are persistent in not accepting help, they'll stop offering it. Y'all are lucky y'all just won't even talk to me. They miss appointments or don't respond, but hey, at least I'm not disfellowshipped still. And that is super funny. What the fuck? I didn't realize that. And Jenny had a few informal meetings, then they disappeared. No contact during my divorce or anything. I feel like they have dropped the ball during COVID. I gotta tell you, that is wild to me. They dropped the ball on me for a long time. I mean, I had a very publicly visible apostate YouTube channel for a solid month. It took them basically a month to disfellowship because they're like, well, the memorial's coming up, and we'd like to meet with you a couple more times before the Judicial Committee. I'm like, why? I think it's because my family's really well known, and I think that there was probably some pressure from my family, like my dad specifically, to be like, please try and reason with him. Please just, I don't know.
You end up in a judicial committee with people asking you, why don't you believe that the governing body is the faithful and discreet slave? So I don't think that you can point at that verse and say, this means that everybody in the organization has to agree about every doctrine, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's not an organization that I want to be a part of. I think that the disagreements and differences between human beings is what makes humanity beautiful. And I think...
Yeah, this sounds lame. At what point do I get fucking heated? That was a misnomer. I fell for my own clickbait. How embarrassing. I'm going to skip ahead to they think they got me.
We're all disagreeing about something.
And I'm saying Tom needs to go, to whatever.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I remember this now. They are saying, like, aha, you think that we should all just be able to have our disagreements, but what if, all three elders on this judicial committee disagreed on something? What would we do? We would have to come to some common consensus. If we couldn't rely back on leadership or doctrine, what would we do? So I think that's what they're talking about.
Well, I'm offended by something. I think these verses apply not to have a meal with him, to stop associating with him, not to have a greeting with him. But maybe that's not a particular situation, or you feel like I'm too strong in that regard, or we could have varying degrees. And then I guess you step back further, and we could, do that with a number of other things, with how we feel about various other teachings. We could have our own opinion, and something that I feel could be offensive to you, something that you state could be offensive to me, and I could say, well, I think that's kind of misleading. And then this group we have
Your
here,
wife Aiden's one of the goats of the comments.
it isn't what I signed up for, very quickly.
Okay. So why not? Okay, so you have different conclusions.
What I'm saying. Okay.
Sorry, I thought you were asking me what I would do.
Deborah!
Well, I guess
Robert won't come to my sports thing.
When we become one of Jehovah's Witnesses, we study to say, this is what I believe. I accept this.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned before, you said, well, a person's opinions can change over time. And that's true. Yes. We can have those feelings, but
you got to shut up about
when we've decided, hey, this is scriptural, this teaching and this fellowshipping, and then when we say, well, but I don't agree with these teachings anymore.
Ooh, thanks for hanging out and contributing so much to chat. It was awesome.
I want to just take it back. Just I don't want it to have. I don't want it to have any type of consequence for me.
Nathan Fielder, what are we doing?
What we believe when we become witnesses are based on what we're seeing in God's word.
I gotta get my.
And if we change our mind later, it doesn't mean that. In our mind, it might mean that, well, I was misled, but it doesn't change the fact that this is the teachings that we see from God's word, the Bible. This is how they should be applied. It's not, and it's not to be unloving to any one particular person, but this is what we feel scripturally. This is how it applies.
You've lost me a little bit because I don't know what the question is. But I think it seemed like you were asking for a little bit like, well, how do we handle disagreements about doctrine if there's no, there's no established teaching, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this did happen in the first century. This is why they had, brothers get together and hash things out. And not everybody agreed. Some people walked away from that meeting about circumcision being angry, and they still didn't agree. You still see the circumcision issue pop up. in the late first century, second century. I mean, the conversation did not end after that happened, even though
It's
the
me.
conversation happened. So these kind of disagreements
Me.
happen all
We
the
didn't
time.
have
They
that.
happen now. If you've ever been,
Hang on
the
a
head
second.
of
There's
anything-
allegations and innuendos happening in chat. This is not true. Okay. I don't have the Kama Sutra on my shelf. I don't need it. I have it memorized, first of all. Wow. So the whole time I walked away, is he still going? Hang on a second. Let me check in.
in any kind of assignment happen. So these kind of disagreements happen in the late first century, second century. I mean, the conversation did not end after that happened, even though the conversation happened. So these kind of disagreements happen all the time. They happen now. If you've ever been, the head of anything in any kind of assignment in the organization, you know that people disagree on how you handle things.
Yeah, sure, I gotta
You get
clean up
5
this
different
joint
brothers
situation.
in parking. How are we going to handle parking? You are going to get 5 different opinions on how we handle parking. But the brotherly love generally is going to come to a place of compromise. Nobody has to be right. We can all have our say, and in the interest of getting the thing done. But whenever any of these verses are cited, it's always something where the preceding verse is like, people are denying that Jesus was resurrected in the flesh. Well, that's not little tiny tiddlywinks. That's
That's okay. That's something my dad would always say. My dad would reference Tiddlywinks, that fucking game where you flip little pieces of plastic. So I think that's why that phrase came to mind. I felt so conscious of the fact that I said that and people on YouTube were going to hear it, even as I said it at the time. Fucking forgot about that. Bells, if I took offense to that, I would have quit YouTube a long time ago, because people say on every video I put out. I gotta say that the recent pot smoking has not helped the allegations. Listen, as a bisexual American, I know a lot about tittles and winks. It's funny. Apparently, a lot of people had trouble following what this guy was saying, but I feel like I understood where he was coming from. I feel like he was saying, like, we have to have unity, because what if there's disagreement? Like, I think even though he rambled on for 20 minutes, I think that's ultimately what he was saying. Yeah, I guess I was able to conjure some kind of answer. The Conjuring.
That's pretty big. If you don't think Jesus Christ was resurrected,
Conjuring the devil made me do
I don't
it.
think you're a Christian.
Not the best.
Me
Conjuring.
again. Hey, so at this point,
Oh, what is
you
this
might
shit?
be wondering if I consider myself to be a Christian.
Oh yeah, I don't care. Oh, I did. Okay. So I walked out of the room and didn't listen to it, and then retroactively assumed that I understood what he was talking about. But in the moment, apparently I didn't. Okay. Well, shit, I don't know. Wait, let me be Seth Rogen. It's not that different from my normal laugh, to be honest. My when I have a big laugh, it's like very
High pitched and jokery, to be honest.
which is why I never laugh. I only frown.
It mentioned that the congregation tolerated the woman Jezebel because of the thing.
Oh yeah, okay. Should I touch on that? I don't know. I'm so disillusioned with the atheist YouTube. I don't want to have the attitude of well, I'm going to be the good atheist YouTuber. Like, there are people who do good stuff. I just think in general, it's not really a space that I connect with a lot. It just doesn't really matter to me that much. And I think the issue I have with the atheist movement, to the extent it exists, or that at least when it did exist, is that it wasn't really rallying around the actual harm that Christianity causes on a systemic level and on an individual level. It was very focused on, we can look at this bit of chronology or science and find out that this biblical claim is not true. And to the extent possible, I try not to do that stuff too much on my channel, because I think that it's more interesting to me to try and use Watchtower's own logic against them. That's just a fun challenge for me. It's obviously not the only way to do things. I really did, at the time, I was really embarrassed about the idea of talking about it on YouTube, especially because I wanted Lloyd to like me, because you kind of had to be liked by him to be accepted in the JW community. I'm sorry, the ex-JW community. But the reality was, I was really trying to make progressive, non-literal Christianity work for me. At least taking a more metaphorical and spiritual approach to the Bible, like acknowledging its imperfections. Like I read a lot of stuff from progressive Christians I thought was like really cool and interesting. And I really liked reading those books. But I think at the end of the day, I was just like, yeah, but I just don't. Then why bother? Why? If I've abstracted the idea of God so much that it is as if he doesn't exist, and then why am I trying to cling to this? You know, it's really only for the ritual and comfort of I guess some kind of afterlife that I'm clinging on to it. So like, to give an update on my Christian status, no, I'm not a Christian. Shit, I would have done the shot with you, but I didn't fill up my drinky cup.
Things that she taught. And so they were counseled against that. Because Jesus said he held that against them. Because
one thing that's also a little weird about this is like, you know, there are 3 elders here, but there's an elder, a guy who's been around for a long time. Actually, I know a couple XJWs that know this guy, but he doesn't say much, but he starts to talk a lot more at the end of the committee. It's almost like he hit a point. He's like, okay, I've had enough of this. I got to put you in your place. And so he, I think, is a lot more aggressive than the other elders. He's the one who calls me like I'm gangrene or something. I'm like the gun in the hand of a child.
This shouldn't have been tolerated because of more sexual immorality, things sacrificed to idols. And so there's a consistent theme throughout the Bible, not just in the first century, but in the Hebrew scriptures as well, as far as adhering.
I think if there's a theme to the Bible, it's that the more men try and literalize and organize around the idea of worshiping God, the more corrupt they become. Like one thing that's kind of interesting to read about the Old Testament is the fact that they weren't considered to be literalistic, positive stories at the time. Like there was an acknowledgement of the flaws in those characters. Like they're not presented as wholly good people. So this notion that we should take like ancient Israel as some kind of model for modern worship is really fucked up.
Standards as far as respecting his channels. We can take issue.
I'm very interested in Gnosticism.
Certainly,
that's awesome.
And that's your prerogative to do that.
Oh, that is 100%.
But again, guys, and say, Jehovah, I've dedicated my life to you. Jehovah, I want to be one of your witnesses, taking on that name of Jehovah's Witnesses. There's a responsibility that goes with that, just like when you sign up for your job. There's a responsibility as an employer working at as certain things that you agree to do.
I blanked out the place where I work.
This
is something that people in the comments of this video pointed out that I didn't think about in the moment. And it's this. It's exactly what Orion at the Sea is saying. I fucking hate this comparison to it as a job. Your job won't take away your entire life and everyone you've ever known. Asinine. Yeah, exactly. And commenters pointed this out. It is really interesting. I didn't really pick up on how they go to this very bureaucratic place. Really interesting, actually. The witness that I debate does the same thing. They always go back to the structure of how an American capitalist business is run as the prime example of how an organization should run. It's like this unconscious but very, very prominent bias that they have. And so I think later Supreme Leader Snoke of the bunch like starts to be like,
well, when you sign a contract, when you join a company, blah, 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 you sign a non-compete contract.
You know, they go to this place of,
well, you wouldn't do this in a business environment.
But there is an inherently corporate structure to the religion. There is an inherently business and capitalist-like or adjacent structure to the religion. And it's just really funny that that's kind of the only way that they can think about it. Sorry, somebody else asked that. I think it was Maria, actually. My hat goes off to you. It can't be easy to relive this traumatic event in a live stream. You know, this, I don't know. The thing that's more traumatic, if you've noticed, I skip past the parts where I'm talking. It's hard for me to watch the bits of me talking to camera. I don't watch any of these. I don't really go back and like watch my videos unless I want to pull a clip for something. It's hard for me to watch myself at that point because immediately, like when I see that setup of our apartment, our previous apartment, and I can see how sick I am too. When I see myself, and you see me too, and we see ourselves in a place that is my old apartment. That really triggers me a lot more. I'm able to remember, like, oh my God, I remember saying this. I remember my mental space. And that to me is a little bit harder to deal with than like hearing these like more logical arguments about what the elders are saying. That part is a little more abstract to me. It doesn't feel as personal, and I kind of felt that way at the time too. And the Christian side of me is thinking, I feel like the Holy Spirit was kind of on me and not the elders there. I felt like I was able to be really articulate, and I was able to argue my points, and I really didn't feel stressed about it while I was doing it. So I don't know why that is exactly. I don't really ever feel stressed doing these live streams either, but you can also see the complete lack of effort that I put into them. So that's why.
Signed up for to stay employed. And
can you sign a contract legally at age 14?
Boom! I forgot I put a...
No, you cannot.
Huh.
But the emoji.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it would depend where you're at too.
Yeah.
Would it? I mean, where can I sign a legal contract at age 14?
In the United States, I know where you're headed with this, and in the United States you can. But
apparently
the thing
I did
is,
then, huh?
So okay, but with that, you're 30 or almost 30.
Yeah.
So you still have a choice. If you don't want to adhere to that contract, I mean, that's your choice. But again, when I look at what was mentioned on,
what's amazing though is like I'm still friends with and in contact with people at my old job. It's like we're not best buddies because we don't see each other every day, but like I don't have to block all my old coworkers on Instagram. I've hung out with people I used to work with. I see them at work and we talk about old times. Like it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. That's not how jobs work. But witnesses don't fucking know this because they don't bother to get to know their coworkers anyway. So they think they get shunned when they leave their job. Just so they don't make friends.
On those posts, it's everything counter. It's divisive to the organization. It's
Divisive.
Everything. It's divisive to Jehovah's
Wow.
name.
Yes.
As far as
And this guy definitely prides himself on being a
regards
fucking
to,
intellectual too. By the way.
Mentioning reference to the lies.
Rich elder. He's got money inexplicably. Has a very good job. Drives a nice car. Very nice suits. Lives in a rich part of town. Divisive. I know. He turned into my bad British accent. We would not want to be divisive when looking at our schedules, would we?
Homosexuality, the blood transfusion issue. It's major teachings that signing up for that name of one of Jehovah's Witnesses, it's pretty much you're saying, hey, you know what? These guys are over here. I don't want to be a part of it.
This is interesting to hear, actually, because the main project I'm working on right now is the rebuttal to that 800-plus page shunning document that Watchtower put out, which, by the way, I finally had to break down and get a teleprompter for because it is about 15 pages of a Word document. It's very long, and there's no way that I can memorize my lines there or memorize them a little bit at a time like I sometimes do. That's what I'm working on now, and that is one of Watchtower and the pseudo fucking bullshit scholars that all work for a cult think tank that they hire. They say like, well, listen, when people sign up to be a Jehovah's Witness, they know that disfellowshipping is a thing. And the argument that I make in that video is that we don't have informed consent. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know about the things that the organization is hiding from us. Therefore, the contract is void. I guess I don't say that in the script, but that's one of the few things they can fall back on. I was like,
They knew they could get disfellowship, so they can't go crying when it happens.
It's pretty. I mean, that's
quarantine. I didn't have anything else.
You're not saying those exact words, but essentially, I mean, that's the way it comes across for anyone that hears that.
won't give up.
Can we pause real quick? I got to go to the restroom.
Yep.
No, that's a good idea.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. I got to.
Where did we leave off?
Yes. Yeah. When I got baptized at 12, we never covered the chapter on losing your family if you ever change your mind. And yeah, that's one of the things that I try to present in the video is like the way that shunning is presented. I didn't realize I just paused on the screen. It says one short piss later. I don't remember saying that. The way it's presented even to witnesses, and the way it's presented, certainly on jw.org and in this shunning document that they've prepared, is that shunning is for unrepentant sinners. And of course, you think when you're a witness, obviously I'm going to repent. I would never do something and then obstinately turn my back on Jehovah. So I would repent. Therefore, I won't be disfellowshipped ever, right? In which, but you can't possibly understand, first of all, anything at the age of 12, let alone a lifelong commitment to a religious organization that may or may not have your best interests in mind. And I would argue that anybody who eagerly accepts 12-year-old members, and the example I point to, which is actually a recent jw.org article, they have right there in one of the news articles in the news section, an 8-year-old getting baptized, and it's labeled, this person's 8 years old getting baptized, mere months after they've published this thing saying that they don't do infant baptism and only mature Christians get baptized. Oh, I'm excited for that video. I really hope it doesn't bomb, because it's a goodie. There's a lot to unpack there. You guys, that's where we left off.
Were you saying something, Brian?
Yeah, well, I was just.
Yeah, I think Brian had left
10.
off.
Yeah, just mentioning
anybody beat
that,
10?
Just from what I've seen, it certainly with the post and everything, it just seemed to be.
This is a good fucking point. Okay, I got baptized at age 14. You know who I wanted to marry? Lindsay Lohan from Mean Girls. I wanted, and now at the age of 30, kind of glad that I didn't stick with that 14-year-old goal I had. I don't know. It's just there's so much that you don't know. And you know what they say though? If you ever point that out, their response is always, well, you're not Jesus. How do you know?
You're just saying you really don't want to be a part of the organization. Again, you're not saying that. You didn't come out with those exact words. But when I look at some of the statements, phrases, beliefs, because even in your post, you're questioning, saying our beliefs as Jehovah's Witnesses. It just seems that you don't want to carry that title anymore. Because
honestly, and I would have gotten to meet Ozzy from Survivor because they dated for a while. Or Lindsay Lohan. I feel so bad for any child actors, which, by the way, book recommendation, Jeanette McCurdy's book. She was on the show iCarly, which I didn't really watch because it was a little after my time when it would have been chill for me to be watching Disney Channel. She wrote a book called I'm Glad My Mom Is Dead, and it's about her life as a child star and developing an eating disorder, but it's also kind of secretly an ex-Mormon story because she grew up in the LDS church. So there's this extra ex-cult layer that I wasn't expecting the story. So if you want a really good quick read, the audiobook is great. She reads it. It will make you want to ban child actors from being able to be a thing. I want to go back to the 50s where everybody in high school looked like they were 50 years old because it is more ethical, if less believable.
Carrying that title means that it's with everything that comes with it. Just like if you want to be an employee of there's certain things you have to adhere to. They have you, take training, non-harassment, and certain things you do in the operating room, certain procedures you have to follow to be so that no germs or get in there. There's any organization. You have certain things to follow if you want to remain a part of the organization.
What the hell? I knew it was a Nickelodeon. What's wrong with me?
I just find it
hard to
reconcile.
This is what it is. I'm glad you brought this up because this is some of the, quick Jake's takes. I was annoyed with the shift to live action shows because I always hated that. I love cartoons. I still love cartoons. And I liked that Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network had fucking cartoons on them. And when they started putting out these live action shows, I was very snooty about it, even as a kid. So I was like, I'm not watching that shit. But I gotta say, I'm pretty sure I watched a fair amount of Drake and Josh and enjoyed it quite a bit.
This is the organization that I dedicated my life to, right? This is something that
I don't remember
not
what
just
I say here.
Like my dad, my grandfather, my great grandfather, a bunch more dedicated their lives to, and I grew up in this religion. And there is a way to use the Bible as a shield for these things. There's also a way to use the Bible to be more compassionate and more understanding and more accepting and less dogmatic.
Thanks, bathtub boy.
So to me, it would be crazy if I just was like, well, yeah, all of these closeted gay witnesses are killing themselves, and we have all of these people who are shunned and they kill themselves, and we have all these people who are willing to, who willingly give their lives to avoid a blood transfusion, when I think that it is overtly unscriptural. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't say something. And so, I don't want to be disfellowshipped. It probably wouldn't surprise you, brothers, to find out that most people are already, shunning me, treating me like a disfellowshipped person.
You know what, though? I think a lot of witnesses watched like Disney Channel and Nickelodeon shows because it was like one of the only things you could watch where there's no cursing, there's no violence, and there's no sex. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of for teenagers, but it's one of the only appropriate things you can watch. But now, I don't know, maybe there's gay people on TV. You can't have that. If you watch gay people on TV, God will not be happy.
Because that's the culture. If somebody is deemed to be bad association, that's enough.
Always.
That's enough for most people, and beyond that, it's a conscience matter, right? Until they're actually disfellowship. And so I would love it if we could all just go our separate ways, and I'm not gonna grab a microphone during the meeting and start spouting out craziness. I'm not gonna pick it in front of the conventions, but I'd like to have a little TBD space that people could take or leave, where I'm able to express myself, and where I'm able to challenge certain things. And I'm not challenging Jehovah. You will not find atheism on my channel. Okay, this is a little bit dubious, I'll admit.
Yeah, okay.
One thing I can say about you, Jake, if nothing else, you sure are honest.
I'm honest, man. I don't have anything to hide anymore.
Yeah, you're honest.
You're honest.
One thing, and maybe you said something that you didn't quite mean it the way it came out. You said you dedicated yourself and your parents and your grandparents to an organization.
Right.
If that's what you did, that may be part of the problem. Our dedication is really not to an organization, because that can be dissolved.
Well, you're very honest. Please get out.
You're right. I did misspeak, because that is what I mean. And I think this has been hard to explain to people, I feel like. But what's been so hard, and one of the reasons why I want to talk to people and share my experiences, because I was raised, and it continues to be reiterated, that being loyal to Jehovah and being loyal to the men at the top of this, multi-million-dollar religious conglomerate are the same exact thing. But what if you pray to Jehovah and you are led by the Spirit to a different answer? What if you love God more than you love these men? What if you don't believe that they were actually entrusted? All you have is their word that they were appointed by Christ.
Looking at things overall, we do have more than that, but not to argue over words.
Sure, I think you know what I mean, right?
Yeah. When I was working for Capital Business Forms, it was a printing company, and so after a while, they came out with a no competition clause. You know what that is?
Yeah, that's kind of like you can't be doing work for a business.
No, this is we're getting that shit. Okay, I want to quickly shout out, by the way. I know they say don't feed the trolls, but I enjoy feeding them food so that we can fill their little troll bellies, and I can yell them, "Hey, look at a big boy!" I had a comment I wanted to read you.
Oh, yeah?
Okay, wait, I'm going to mute my mic so I can tell you who it's about. Okay, this is... All right. Shulamite Faden, I'm going to read your comment to
Jarbin, the butler. Okay. Okay.
Something that I.
No, it's just you'll find it funny.
Oh, okay.
Because they're just hearing the audio, right?
Uh-huh.
So Shulamite Faden says, I feel like this dude thinks if he draws his words out, he will sound smarter. I want to set his playback speed to 1.5.
Imagine listening to that every Sunday.
I know he was
as a watchtower conductor.
He was our watchtower conductor, and it was exactly like that.
Yep.
So yes.
And he could never remember anybody's name.
No. I don't think he said my name the entire time. I think he's like, "Hey, friend."
I'm surprised he knew your name during your judicial meeting.
No, he doesn't. He's like, "All right, Chief."
Apostate.
Yeah, apostate. Sit down.
Chief apostate.
Yes. Indeed. Yeah, he was just a snore to listen to every week. Okay, so he's like talking about the non-compete fucking
That's in competition with the business you work for? Is that
Exactly.
what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah. So I couldn't hold a second job, not that I wanted to anyway.
Okay.
But there are other people who had worked their lives away. So if a person was to do that and hold a second job with a
Not give 'em money.
competitor, what would the company you're working full-time for, the first company, what would they do to keep you employed? They might talk with you
Mhm.
and ask where you stand with this. Remember, this is what you committed to. Are you still willing to do that, which would necessitate, if you want to work another job, that's fine. You just can't work at a competitor. But if the person insisted, no, I really love the company. I like the people there. I like what I'm doing. I enjoy my work here. What would the original company eventually do because of the no contract or competitor clause?
Jesus.
Yeah,
None of these guys
should
can make
say
a
it's either
fucking
us or
point.
them, right? You'd have to make a decision.
Yeah. And it's with
But is there a clause?
some religions, you can believe whatever you want to believe, and it doesn't matter.
When I was 14,
But in Jehovah's
I
organization,
got baptized.
where
I
we
don't
are,
remember the exact year. I could do the
we
math. I
believe
don't want to.
that's kind of the case where we're working for this organization. And if you want to be part of another organization, whether it's your own thinking or something contrived by somebody else, that's okay. But you can't stay employed with company A.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, I joined the school when I was 7. Well, obviously, I was born into it, so yeah. Based, by the way.
You're gonna
You
have
see,
to-
Company A has the power to make sure that your entire social system you've built up for your entire life and your family don't speak to you. It's more than Company A. There's an incredible amount of power here.
You can only
And-
carry a comparison so far, but
Well,
You know
yeah,
what
yeah,
I mean.
but you
You
know
know
what
what
I'm
I mean.
saying.
You
can't-
see what they do though. This is what happened. Anytime my parents would make some fucking illustration, I would break it down and say why it doesn't make sense, and they're like, "Well, it's just an illustration." And I'm just like, "Okay, well then what? Then what are you saying?" You know, like if I would break down some issue I had with poetic language in the Watchtower, they do the same thing. It's like, "Well, it's not literal." It's like, okay, all right. Oh boy,
can't be
Shulamite's
Both.
opening the tequila.
I
And-
understand
and-
what you're saying, but I
just
think
like Adam and Eve. You know,
Well,
their
don't
decision
think past
impacted you and me and
the
everybody
logic holes
else,
that I've leaped over.
including Jesus, because he had to leave heaven. Paul said, "You reap what you sow."
Mhm.
So,
Well,
Yeah.
Jesus was a Jew, right?
yes, he was.
Who did he argue against? Pharisees, leaders
Mhm.
of a sect of Judaism.
And he condemned them.
He condemned them. He
Offsprings of
consistently
serpents
preached against the
vipers.
religious leaders of the religion of his birth. Now, I'm not Jesus. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying
Well,
that
I don't know.
there is nothing scripturally
an
wrong
update
with
on that at the end.
challenging the religion of your birth. Jesus was not baptized a Christian. Christianity
Yeah,
didn't
exactly.
exist. Other people after him were baptized in the name of him, but he was baptized as a Jew. But he spent his entire life saying, yeah, they don't have it right. Here's the real situation. Now, I'm not going that far. I don't think I have any kind of truth to proclaim, but I think it's worth pointing out harmful teachings that impact people.
Bo wants to say hi.
And that's your right to think that way.
Do you
Jay.
think I
not wanna be
deserve
held
to be shunned for that? I think is the question. And I think, wouldn't it be nice if I could just go my own way and that would be the end of it?
Well, that would be nice for you, but it can also be dangerous for
That would be
others.
nice for you, wouldn't it?
In what way?
Another illustration, a parent or parents at times, sadly, has happened too often. They leave their child at home with other siblings, and they find a loaded gun. And what happened?
Bo, don't.
So by posts, as I believe the post, one of them, or part of what I didn't see much. I saw a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the interview. It was had something like an exemplary pioneer and ministerial servant of Jehovah's Witnesses. That does damage to God's name, Jehovah, because everybody, some people,
It
not
did sound
everybody,
like parrot to me.
some people look at one of Jehovah's Witnesses questioning, and then they judge the organization that way. When I was printing at Bethel, it was a different style of printing. That was a long time ago. But it was easy to pick up a pebble or a bit of debris and dirt. So we were always...
Do you notice, like, this is what Watchtower tends to fall back on? Like, I really think that they have a thing where they're like, well, if you can illustrate it, that makes it true. But then as soon as you kind of point at the flaws in their illustration, they're like, well, it's just an illustration, calm down. But this guy, like, he doesn't actually have an argument, but what he does have is decades worth of illustrations that he's built up to justify stuff to himself. So he just keeps on coming back at me with more illustrations that he's come up with over the years. All right, I gotta kick Bo out again, unfortunately. I'll play this though.
If we weren't running the press, checking through the forms that we were printing, we had to sweep around the press. The whole area had to be swept constantly. Why? Because we were told if a dirt spot gets on our publication, like I printed Foreign Language Watchtowers and Awakes and Kingdom Ministries, they said the whole organization will be judged by that one dirt spot. So what we had to do was, when we saw that there was a dirt spot, first thing was to turn off the press and go find the dirt spot and get it off.
He's still doing this shit. I mean, let's talk about the loaded gun thing, right? It's pretty insane. Like, he's just saying, like, you know, if we leave you around and pretend like you're not dangerous, then that's like the loaded gun in the hand of a child, because the bullet in this metaphor is just, they might think the organization isn't so great. It brings reproach upon God's name, Jehovah. This name, the literal name that they fetishize.
And the second thing we had to do was we had to work our way back. We were to always stack our pallets of publications in the same order.
Really good point.
Every pallet, every pressman, every assistant. That way we could go back and find the original dirt spot.
Wally, I love watching you leave.
And would have to set those aside or throw them away. So sometimes people, even if they're not Jehovah's Witnesses, will look at one who is, or who has been called one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and look at the questions, the disagreements with some very basic Bible teachings to us. Disfellowshipping, and we don't hate homosexuals or we wouldn't talk to them.
At this point,
but we do believe the Bible condemns their conduct, so we try to assist and encourage them. And then that's up to them. But for one of Jehovah's Witnesses to engage in that type of socializing or media, it can do more damage than good, even if it's not the one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It just doesn't help.
Well, what's the damage that you see? Because you've compared me to a loaded gun in a dirt spot. So what's the damage that's going to happen here?
Many people will not even bother to look at us.
Okay.
They might have at one time thought
Okay.
about, wonder what Jehovah's Witnesses
Thank you,
have. Maybe I
Bob.
should study with them for a few months.
Well, do you care about the person's relationship to God, or do you care about them joining the ranks of a religion?
We want them to worship Jehovah. We
Yeah.
spend a lot of time and effort at
Who
our own
makes it
expense,
grow?
as you know.
Who draws them and makes it grow? It's Jehovah. So if a
That's right.
YouTube video or a whatever, I think Jehovah's more powerful than that.
Yeah, he is. It just doesn't help, Jake.
Yeah, he is. It just
It
doesn't
does
help.
more
Yeah.
damage than good.
Yeah.
Okay, so you think that I am a loaded gun left with a child?
Okay, well, there's a lot to unpack, and thanks for so many people sticking around too. This is so cool. This elder has a very good reputation among older guys in the congregation. Is not necessarily as well liked by younger guys, but I had a great deal of respect for this guy, as you might imagine, because he was a good speaker. He obviously had a lot of illustrations to use. He just had a nice quality about him. The thing that was traumatic about this, in at least an abstract sense, it was like objectively traumatic, but the whole time it was like I had watched them turn into different people. These are people that I had lovely conversations with. I'd been to their house, joked around with. I've known for years. Nathan Fielder is related to me. It's just kind of weird to see this completely different demeanor, different tone, complete lack of ability to engage with arguments. You know, these people that you build up as being so wise can only spew ridiculous ignorance. I love this comment. When you change the name to brand, it makes a lot more sense. I once told an elder, Jehovah God can handle reproach. He's a god. And that's a really fucking good point. Like what they're saying is the brand cannot handle this reproach. This is toxic to our brand. And that really is their chief concern. That's fantastic. I'm probably going to steal that. OMG, the one thing that I did talk about in my JC was the treatment of gay people, and my elders did the same thing. It's just unbelievable. And I had already heard, I think I was desensitized to it a little bit because I had heard so many people, from elders to my parents, say these things like, we don't hate gay people. Yeah, I think what they envision as hatred in their head is thinking like, meh, and like waving a finger, which, by the way, the leadership fucking does. They do wag their finger and sneer and talk about how Jehovah hates this demented practice, or however they put it. So they do that. That is hateful. You can't say, oh, I don't hate this person. I just hate who they are as a person. It's an immutable part of themselves, and I hate that part of them. But, you know, generally, as a human being, and they can't even say, well, it's not like I want them to die, because they literally do. Like, okay, yeah, they don't want people to die, but they can't wait for the end of the system of things in which people who don't stop being gay will die. They have a very limited view of hatred when it comes to that. But when you think about the way they talk about hate, what Jehovah hates when it comes to entertainment, it is a pretty ridiculous standard. Like it's a completely insane, no nonsense approach to like violent movies or violent video games. So yeah, it's covert hatred. And I think it's like systemic racism in a way. You don't necessarily see the hate radiating from like the fucking Capitol building. Well, bad example, I guess on January 6th, you could. You see it in the end result of systems that are in place. And that's like what witnesses be doing, bro. And yeah, good fucking point. Like the leadership do think that they're going to take part in the battle, which will involve killing. So like literally Tony Morris thinks he's going to kill some gay people. Interesting. I just wish people would, fucking own their beliefs.
Do you mind, Tom?
I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing is you could be a danger to others, including perhaps family. We don't know.
But what is the danger? What is the danger in critically examining whether or not something is true?
Probably what Dathan Byerman and Cora said.
Nathan the
Criticizing, complaining, questioning.
Man.
That's the beginning of
You mean like what Jesus did with the Pharisees? He criticized what they were doing.
No, Jesus had the truth, didn't he?
Right.
And he knew what they did was a corruption.
Okay.
This is amazing.
Dathan, Cora, and Abiram.
This is amazing.
They had it wrong.
Okay.
But he had the truth. So we know he was right. And we know that we have the truth. So don't be silly. Like, they cannot fathom that they could be the Pharisees. And it's like, do you think that the Pharisees thought they were wrong? Like, no, they thought they were right. They thought they were extremely correct. And they thought they could own Jesus in the marketplace of ideas and kept getting fucking owned.
Jesus did with the Pharisees. He criticized what they were doing.
No,
Oh.
Jesus had the truth, didn't he?
Right.
And he knew what they did was a corruption.
Okay.
Dathan, Korah, and Abiram, they had it wrong.
Okay.
And they complained. The Israelites, at times, Numbers 11, they complained bitterly. And because of that, Jehovah struck thousands
That's really good.
because of it. The damage done, because that complaining spirit or disagreement and outspokenness could spread like gangrene
Outspokenness.
or
What a
wildfire, whatever illustration you want to use.
I'd rather not use any of them.
It's going to spread and it's going to do harm.
Thanks for hanging out, dude.
I have a question for you, brothers. And this is
I remember
another
this part. This is good.
earnest question, because this is something that I've had a hard time
This is the most conceited thing I've ever done.
getting an answer out of, talking to like my dad or somebody like that, where it's a little bit more emotional. But what I don't understand is where it ends. How far are you brothers willing to go when it comes to following anything you hear from headquarters?
We examine the scriptures just like the Bereans
No,
did
they did not.
Okay.
to see if these things are so, and if that's the case.
So give me an example of something that would give you pause. Like what would give you pause and say, hang on a second, they're not right about that.
Witnesses fucking hate the New Testament.
Let me just mention when love is involved.
Yeah, they were. I was about to pause it and say the same thing.
Like,
Past Jake and I are very in tandem.
Maybe asking your parent, like,
I finished off that blind.
how far are you willing to go to help me? And usually a parent will give their life. I don't have children, but a parent would give their life for their child or for a loved one, for that matter. Mm-hmm. When you look at an organization who over years has promoted field service, has promoted meeting attendance, and because of the pandemic is proved over and over again that love is the motivating factor behind that. And so, we have to get there. Faith is the evident demonstration of realities that will not be held. We see demonstrations of their love, but we want to help you as far as
I did do some editing in this video. I think, if I'm remembering right, just cutting out long pauses between the shit this guy said, because he does. This is how he would conduct the Watchtower too. It's just like, now if we look at paragraph 8, and we really like, it's just like everything's like, just get it out of your fucking system, get it out of your mouth.
But this is the problem. I don't have any issue with my faith in God. You're talking about having faith in a religious system. You're talking about having faith in the governing body who delegate to the teaching committee and the branch and the blah, 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 blah. I mean, you're not talking about faith in God. And this is my problem, is that in this organization, there's no difference between the religious system and the Almighty. And I think that's unhealthy.
And that can go. Do you remember Brother Losh's video where they had dissension? It was back.
I couldn't believe he brought this up.
I guess he was probably a young man.
I could not believe he brought this up.
Yes, I do remember that.
They broke off and they wanted to try to bring back unity.
Are you talking about when there were people who infiltrated the elders?
Right, exactly. Infiltrated and it caused a division. And so when that division happened, there were individuals that still served Jehovah, but they weren't part of that organization. And the brothers, as part of the organization, made a conscientious effort to reach out to them and bring them back. And so I say that to say those individuals, they did serve Jehovah. That they weren't serving
I know it. I do the same thing
but
all the
the
time.
organization helps. There are organizational procedures. There's certain things, or the ways the organization wants us to do things, even as far as staying safe in this pandemic. If we left it up to ourselves, we might have COVID at this point, because
this is so this is fucking infuriating to listen to.
Political,
but I want to get them on this thing.
There are benefits to being part of that organization. Jehovah.
He's rambling on a bit. Do you guys remember this? Do you remember this video that he's referencing? Yeah, there was this experience that like Brother Loesch gave, and I don't remember what part of the world he was in, but he talks about how like secret police infiltrated the elder body, like people like who like joined the religion turned out to be secret police members and stuff. And it was pretty remarkable to me, because it like kind of confirms that the Holy Spirit was not operating. They're praying for Holy Spirit to bless their decisions, and yet they allowed a literal criminal, or not criminal, but well, he's a cop, right? They allowed a secret police officer who does not believe and is only doing this as a spy. Completely blows up the idea that the Spirit has anything to do with elder appointments. So it was pretty insane to me that he brought this up, but actually, he's not the only person that brought this up to me when I was questioning. They're like, well, weren't you think about this? And I was like, how are you seeing this as a good thing? Romania, that might be right.
Even when the Jehovah sometimes does things that aren't straightforward for us humans. When the Israelites left Egypt, they went in a weird way. They went down and back up, and the Egyptians were like, they're in confusion. When they left and headed to the promised land, they didn't take a straight shot. They went down and back up. And you feel, why would a loving God do that? There's women, children. That makes no sense at all.
Good question.
He's taking them twice as far as it needs to be. So, but again, are we willing to follow sometimes what seems to us not to be
this is
logical,
fucking insane.
And follow Jehovah's way, or the way he's leading us. And that's
what you see here. And I don't remember what I say in response to this, but like the thing that's striking me now listening to this is like there is a pride in being able to articulate the doctrine, and there is a pride in following orders. And that's the same thing that fascist movements stir up too, is like there is a real pride in upholding order, in carrying out the will of the supreme leader, whoever that may be. And so I remember hearing that the first thing about, we may get direction that we don't understand. I'm pretty sure I was in Warwick when I heard that, or it was part of a daily text or something. I think I gave a comment on it at the morning worship. Like it was, it didn't strike me as weird. It struck me as, this will be another test of my faith. There is this pride that you take, and it is instilled in, and you see it in the music videos. There is just a stirring emotional connection to doing something that you're told to do. I was told to do a thing, I did it, and the music plays. Like that's kind of the thing that's drilled into you that makes it almost impossible for them to understand that sometimes they might follow an order that is harmful to themselves. So if you haven't seen Ben Ford's, I don't know if it's his latest video, I think it's his latest video on Cartgate, it's really fucking good because it shows a disagreement that happened between branch committees. A certain branch sent out people in the middle of a pandemic and, could have gotten people killed. It was not in their best health interest that happened, and yet it happened anyway. Yeah, this is interesting, Samantha. I feel like, I guess it's not portrayed as following orders. It's portrayed as obedience. But I do think there's something to be said for just the fact that sometimes you just fucking tune out the stuff they're saying.
Something that we have to individually ask ourselves.
Well, if I can mention that, it's interesting that you brought up that particular experience, because I found that experience to be shocking that Brother Loesch brought out. He talked about how some of these they were kind of like government informants or something, right? They were
that infiltrated, yeah.
So they infiltrated. Okay, well, that was not super helpful to me as somebody who was trying to determine if Holy Spirit was guiding the organization, because I was told that elders were spirit appointed, and that if something should prevent an elder from being appointed, then the spirit would prevent that from happening.
Awesome.
But he was saying that spies infiltrated the elders, that these elders, they had meetings, they prayed about it, and they appointed them anyway, which seems to go against the very idea of the spirit intervening, which was kind of shocking to me.
Now remember, we've never claimed infallibility.
No, I'm not claiming infallibility, but I am saying that we call the elder spirit appointed, don't we?
Well, what about Judas?
The spirit's not infallible.
I mean, Judas did the same thing.
I said it wrong. I should have said the spirit is not fallible. Like, they want to, they're trying to say, well, we've never said that we're infallible. But it's like, no. You can't call yourself spirit-appointed men and then say that sometimes the spirit fucks up or something. And it's like, if it's possible for you to misinterpret the spirit or not follow it correctly, then what's the fucking point? Just do whatever your gut tells you, which is what they do anyway.
Well, you know what's amazing about Judas is that Jesus didn't shun him. He didn't disfellowship Judas.
Well, on the last night he did.
This is
He said, go.
This
take care of
fucking
what you
thing
need
he
to
says
take
is
care
so
of.
I mean, after
And
he,
Judas
like,
came up and
after he
kissed
gave him up for murder, yeah, I guess so. I don't think I'm doing anything quite like that. I think that that very night when Jesus knew, he still had a meal with the dude.
at least at first.
No, not at first. They had
I
a
think
whole
the thing
meal.
that's,
They had
I
a
think the
whole
thing that's
last-
confusing me is that, like, depending on the gospel account, Judas was there or Judas was not, but Watchtower needs them all to be equally simultaneously true, even when they contradict each other. So, like, he's saying, like, well, he was there for part of it. Like, it's all very confusing.
Last Supper.
They had no, they weren't at the
No,
Last Supper,
no.
which was
That's
the
such a good
Passover
way to put
memorial.
it.
He had dismissed Judas at some point
And-
before
yeah.
he started
Oh, I see what you're saying.
passing
Okay.
the bread and the
Yeah.
wine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Jake, you mentioned what harm you would be doing. But let's look at 1 Timothy chapter 1. But by means of these YouTube posts expressing your views. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 18 through 20.
Sorry, hang on one second. This is just taking a second.
Sure.
I think I was checking
First
OBS
Timothy
at
1,
this point to make sure it was still
Yeah.
running.
Okay.
It says, this instruction I entrust to you, my child Timothy, in harmony with the prophecies that were made about you, that by these you may go on waging the fine warfare, holding faith and good conscience, which some have thrust aside, resulting in the shipwreck of their faith. Hymenaeus and Alexander are among these. I have handed them over to Satan so that they may be taught by discipline not to blaspheme. So that's the problem with it. It can shipwreck the faith of others. Whether or not
I think it's literally what
you know,
happened.
you can say, well, I disagree with this teaching,
Shrewdest.
but let me just, and one other scripture I just want to share with you. It's in, I just had it here, 2 Corinthians 11. Are false apostles deceitful? Satan himself keeps that his ministers also keep disguising themselves.
Boring.
You know, we've talked, and I think it was our
Bible's
last
boring.
discussion. I was mentioning when I've seen the Apostle Paul, how many times he was mentioning to Timothy in his letters to the congregations to be on guard for apostasy, to
Nice.
watch out for someone teaching them other than the teachings of Christ, or not following in a certain pattern of teachings that they had accepted. So that direction is there because it could shipwreck the faith of some.
The direction is there.
Is it? Do you consider
I
it
wonder
a
if direction
possibility
is in the Bible?
that perhaps you could have been deceived by apostate thinking? Do you consider that remotely possible?
Yeah, I think that's possible. Yeah. Do you? I mean, but it's two-way street. Do you think it's possible that you have been deceived by the things you've been taught?
I don't feel that way at all. But
Okay, so you don't think it's possible?
I don't feel that. Could you, if you ask me, is it possible?
I'm asking you if it's possible.
This is
I think
good.
of how I was there. I don't
Well-
feel, based on what I've read in the
I feel like the other guys
scriptures
are like, duh.
and what I've been taught, that it is possible that I've
Well, shoot. I guess if that's the parameters, then I don't think it's possible that I've been misled.
That's true.
But when you think about deception implies that that someone has an intent
Mhm.
to lead you the wrong way, and so I guess what would be as far as apostates, their intent is clear as far as to lead.
Oh, it isn't. I mean, it's not. Okay. So, here's what's kind of interesting about this, and this is, of course, something that I heard from my parents as well. Is they're like, you've been tricked, you've been deceived. What have you been reading? Yeah. Now, the funny thing, and the thing that I tried to take pains to show in my video about why I left the witnesses, was that like all of the issues that I had with the organization existed before I did any apostate research. I already didn't believe it anymore, just with trying to reconcile the publications with my own sense of logic and the Bible and morality, I guess, with what I thought was just right and wrong. And so to me, like I just wanted to leave the organization basically because I just could not agree with their LGBTQ stance. I just didn't want to be a part of that. That was enough for me. There was no deception. I know what their stance is. My stance is different. I have not been deceived. I just disagree. And what I think they have in their head, and by they I just mean witnesses in general, is that like apostates have this like really sneaky, crazy conspiracy theory or something to show why like witnesses are like secretly evil. And it really isn't like that. The things that apostates talk about, it's a bunch of different shit. Like for some people, the thing that causes them to wake up is realizing what historians actually say about 607, which is that they don't say anything about it because nothing happened in 607. It happened in 587. And that's not being deceived by apostates. That's reading a history book and believing them more than the self-admittedly uneducated guys in Bethel. And then there's people who find out about the child sex abuse cases. And that's not a result of deception by apostates. That's a result of reading court transcripts, watching Jeffrey Jackson on camera in an unedited video, and you can read the fucking transcripts on the government website. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they think that we as apostates have some secret little sprinkle, some magic pitch that we give that just, it seems like it unravels everything. But it isn't. It's accumulation of like a million tiny little things, and of obviously some big things that add up when taken in their totality. And that's one of the reasons why I try and focus on just trying to use other Watchtower publications to debunk their own shit, because I feel like my issue that I was running up against when I was trying to reconcile my doubts was this doesn't make sense by our own logic. And that's kind of what I try and demonstrate, right? So I get really fucking annoyed by the deceit thing. I get really upset. Well, not anymore because nobody says that, but like, I got really upset. Like when I would hear that from my parents, they just couldn't wrap their mind around the fact that I just came to a different conclusion from them. It had to be that I was tricked by somebody who was saying something sneaky. That shit's really annoying. And of course, the thing I do remember this, and this is the thing I'm proudest of with this video, and that for me, it was worth it to have this little bit on tape of them saying, okay, well, what if you were wrong? Are you willing to accept the possibility that you're wrong? And I'm like, yes, I am. I'm willing to accept the possibility that I'm wrong. And I really was, I was okay with I reached that conclusion of like, well, if God really thinks this, then I guess I just disagree with God. I guess I'm okay with that. And I had, for whatever reason, the presence of mind to ask them, okay, but like, are you willing to admit that you could be wrong? And them just universally saying, no, we are not. But you definitely are. but we're not willing to admit that we might be wrong. No, none of them have left. That's kind of the one thing that I hope sticks with them, I guess, is that, and asking them how far they're willing to go, because that is something that terrifies me and that I try to, leave my parents with too, is just like, please just be safe. And, it's something I brought up to Jarbin the butler too, out of genuine concern, which is like, listen, I genuinely worry about this stuff, even though I know it's a little conspiratorial, but a lot of these groups end the same way. And when you repeatedly have this language of you need to do shit that you don't understand no matter what, I think you have to be willing to accept the possibility that they might ask you to do something dangerous to yourself, right? Good comment from Samantha. It's always possible to be wrong. Certainty is kind of just impossible for most practical things. And I think it's a lot better to be aware of that than to pretend otherwise. Yeah, I agree. That's kind of the issue with their thinking, though, is like they're like, oh, okay, well, you think you found the truth? And I'm like, no, I just don't think that this is true. But I don't think that there's a new all-encompassing true thing that I believe in now. But to them, there has to be a truth. It's fucking annoying. It sucks. Because you're a genius when you're in, but when you're out, you're a dummy who goes along with anything and got tricked. Oh boy, when you put it like that, we can't be wrong, but we also never said we're infallible. And they'll be like, we couldn't be wrong. It's like, okay, when were we wrong? And they'll say Christmas. We used to celebrate Christmas. It's like, okay, so that was, please name one other example. They might say the cross. We used to have a cross and crown pin. Okay. How about in the last 100 years? I mean, can we bring it up a little more recently? And what about stuff that it actually impacts human life? Like that shit is all aesthetic. I mean, you have a Christmas tree in your house, you don't. I don't give a shit. When you're telling people to be willing to give their life or to rot in prison, to die by refusing to accept a blood transfusion, to live a life of celibacy because God would hate it if you acted on your homosexual desires. Yeah, sorry, I'm inarticulate for many reasons.
No, it's just because I just smoked a little bit of it.
If there is deception with the governing body, I'm assuming that's what you're referencing, or the organization, what would be the purpose? What would be the purpose for that? What would they accomplish?
I don't remember this. This is interesting.
So what does the verse say? That the devil would disguise himself as an angel of light, right? Yeah, I mean, that's what it says, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems to me that if I was going to disguise myself as an angel of light, I would try to
used to have a proper country.
Like I was the greatest religion in the world. But I would also silence anybody who disagreed with me. I wouldn't allow anybody to criticize me.
Kind of went off on here.
I was always struck by that verse as a young person, because I always felt like, well, that means I need to be on guard against Jehovah's Witnesses too. I'm not kidding. That thought really did occur to me as a little kid.
That's true. I did think about that.
I felt like we were being guided by angels of light. If that's what if that's what Satan's going to disguise himself as, that means I have to be on guard against everything and test every inspired word and utterance that I'm taught. And if you're actually going to test it, that doesn't mean going on Watchtower Online Library and looking for the answer that our guys have come up with. You're always going to come up with the right answer if you go to the jw.org, because the committees, they want you to find the right answer. They wrote all the articles on there. You're not going to find like a Washington Post article on there.
I don't answer questions about that.
So you're always going to be reinforced to what you already believe. So I think you have to be willing to be critical about the things you hold dear. I don't think it's particularly humble to say, I'm pretty sure that I have the truth about everything, and all the things that I don't know, I'm going to know it because God's going to reveal it to me. But it's basically impossible that I'm wrong, and anybody who openly disagrees with me is probably an agent of Satan. I don't think that's really Christian humility, if we're being totally honest. So, is it possible that I've been deceived?
I'm just listening
I
to my
do
own
think
voice
that's
and being
possible.
Like,
I have accepted that.
It's like Aziz Ansari bit from an old stand-up special where he like goes to Kanye's house and Kanye is just jamming to his own songs, saying these beats are dope. That's kind of what I was doing. I was like, oh wow, this kid's preaching some truth out there on the streets.
My feeling is,
Spreading
I
that
have
good fucking
prayed
news.
so earnestly, and I have beseeched Jehovah so like through tears.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered this basically. Yeah, I mean, that is something that I'm glad I went through. That was actually really interesting to listen back to. I'm actually quite happy with how I performed, which I didn't know, because a lot of, like some of my older videos, I wouldn't mind remaking in a way, because I disagree with some of my points or my argumentation, but I did not know where. I don't fucking care, because obviously for them, they're like, okay, so what is the truth? And it's like, yeah, maybe the truth is that there's no the truth. The truth is just life is a lot of little truths. But what would be their goal? Why would they do that? Why would they ever deceive us? That is another thing that I still hear from witness apologists who pop into the comments or my emails from time to time. Is they're like, well, they don't want anything. They're not after money. So what would be their end goal? And it's like, sometimes people just think they're right, and but they're not. But they get really dogmatic about the thing they think they're right about. The obvious answer, I think, is power. I think that it is just intoxicating to people, especially when you've lived your entire life in a religion that deprives you of any kind of autonomy in your own life. You're not allowed to really have any position of authority in the world. So for these guys, once they start working their way up the ranks, of course, they get a taste of that with being an elder. And as they become parts of different committees and work their way up to the governing body, part of the appeal is being in charge of something. I don't think they would ever admit that to themselves, but that is a motivation. And just because their motivation is not monetary doesn't mean it's not measurable and obvious. Like, what is it that hard to believe that some religious leaders just really like telling people what to do? That was really interesting to listen back to. I have a weird hope that my dad is listening to that. I think for my dad specifically, because he's an elder, obviously, and I would be interested to hear what he thinks about what I said. I really have no concept of whether my parents have really watched any of my videos beyond watching them for 5 seconds and being like, oh God. I sincerely doubt that they're like, okay, I'm going to sit down and really listen to this and pay attention. And, oh, what a funny little joke that he made. I don't think they really do that. And I think I asked my dad, at least when I was first going through it, first going through the process of talking to the elders and getting disfellowshipped and stuff. And he said that he hadn't watched it. But I feel pretty happy with showing okay, they said all the stuff that they're supposed to say. I feel like I held my own. I mean, look, the thing that fucks me up most is just resentment and I guess more confusion towards my parents, or confusion towards my feelings towards my parents. Like what I was talking about earlier, do I want them to be happy or not? Part of me wants them to be miserable because I don't want them to be happy without me in their lives. I hate the idea that they can just forget about me and go and have a nice time and not think about me, and to live with the fact that they shun their child over religious differences. That fucking upsets me. At the same time, of course, they're my parents. I want to love them. So I think that's a lot of the underlying shit that I need to work through, in therapy and stuff. I don't talk about that stuff too much because I do worry that they might watch it or watch something someday. And I know that my dad would hate the fact that I'm talking about him on the internet at all. I'm sure it would drive him insane to know that. And a part of me wants to respect that. I don't think he ever, he doesn't like being online. He doesn't like the internet. He doesn't like social media. He didn't want us to post shit about him on Instagram. So I'm a part of me wants to not ever talk about him on here because I know that it would upset him. Obviously it would. I don't have a lot of great things to say about him currently, but obviously I love my parents in a weird way. To try and tie this up with a bow, going through the Judicial Committee, it was kind of healing for me. It was something I felt like I needed to do. I knew that it would appease my parents. I know that they felt better about the fact that I didn't just disappear one day and told the elders to fuck off or whatever. It made them feel a little bit better. Hearing the elders say all this stuff, it's all stuff that my parents had said and asked me about, which is why I had better responses prepared for them than I did for my parents whenever I would talk to them. But I think hearing that stuff from the elders kind of made me realize, like, you know, it really isn't my parents' reasoning. It's not their argument. It's not their opinion, even. This is the company line. This is the answer that they have to hold on to. And in a way that made it feel like less of a personal attack on me. It abstracted it a little bit. It made me realize, like, oh yeah, you know, they're just repeating the things they're supposed to repeat. Because, like, even in this closed door session with 3 elders whose job it is to try and change my mind or tell me why I'm wrong, they had nothing. And I feel like I was able to remain pretty calm, and occasionally they would get flustered and name call or gun call. They called me a gun at some point. So yeah, I don't know. I feel good about looking back on this. I don't think I want to look back at any of the other stuff that I've talked about that's more like personally traumatic. I've had a lot of people, somebody asked earlier if any of the elders have woken up from the committee, and people ask me that, like, oh, there's no way one of them doesn't wake up. Man, I don't know. You know, the one guy the whole time seemed to be trying to think of an answer to the first thing I said so he can, you know, show me a scripture later. I think in their mind, they're hearing things and immediately being like, okay, how do I answer this? What's the scripture? So I don't know how much of this really has sunk in, but I have to imagine they're aware of the fact that the recording exists, and I'll bet they're a little curious. So I don't know, maybe they'll listen back to to the recording of it. That would be interesting. I would be pretty surprised if any of them ever exit. Shooketh, I would be. These are the pillars upon which pillars are built. These are hardcore JWs, and hardcore JWs wake up. A governing body member woke up. But I doubt it. First of all your comments are fucking amazing, and all of you guys have been fucking amazing the entire time. You guys are always so fucking funny and insightful, and you're always able to whittle down whatever thing I'm rambling about into something much more succinct. Hey, you know, that's fucking true, and I feel like kind of an asshole for even saying that. So, like, that's true, X-Witness Awake. Like, we all have our own metrics of success, and it's funny how quickly. I remember, I don't know if you know the YouTuber Big Joel, but he said something on Twitter once that kind of stuck with me, and I wish would have stuck with me more. That he's like, he was surprised at how quickly he felt like he deserved way more views than he would get, like comparing himself against like really big creators, even when he was young. And I guess I gotta stop doing that shit. Man, that's so true though. Comparing ourselves to people is JW nature. It's so true. That's another both sides of the mouth thing. Like, they preach, don't compare yourselves to other people, even as they're like, okay, but also here's an example of somebody doing more than you, and could you examine your circumstances and be more like that person? Maybe you are. I don't know. That is actually an interesting point. I never thought about that, but one of the things they like to say in their apologetics is they're like, well, anything you hear could have been edited or manipulated. And if they tell me to take something down, that kind of validates the truthfulness of it. That's good. I hadn't thought about that. Yes, by the way, unfortunately, I think that's basically what we're having here. Jenny, thanks for stopping by. You're always the best and funniest. Thank you so much. And do follow her on TikTok, too. TikTok 2. That's the sequel to Timbuktu. No, sorry, the sequel to Timbuktu is Timbuk 3.